Alright, so welcome back again. My name is Jesse, and in this wonderful and exciting tutorial, I'm trying to build a very simple application in Python with Django, HTMX, and then some LLM. So let me show you what we're building. So if I come back to the app has two sessions. There is a session in which you can add in some text. So you can add in something like, let's say, read system design. If I go back to add, you can see that this information is automatically added to it. I can delete the data that I have there already automatically out of the box. And then we also have another session in which we can communicate with an LLM still on the same page. And as you can see, this is some of the questions I already asked. And if I ask something like a different question, like say Grafana, if I go with Grafana, this is going to be sent to the backend, right, to the LLM, and we are going to get our results, right? So that is the basic understanding. So let's make sure that it is still running, and the information is going to be sent, and then you can going to see the result. So graph, that's the first word I typed there, and then if I go with Grafana, you can see the result of Grafana has been shown. Very powerful, right? So this is communicating with an LLM. So let's see the workflow behind the scene. So the workflow is that we have a session for input, and then when you send in an input, it is sent to the backend or to an API, and we are using HTMX to do with that routing, all right, with the to API or to the LLM. And this is the UI interface. So we have one for the ask and query, which will communicate with the LLM via HTMX to the backend, and then another one for adding our input. So let's see how to build this app from scratch. So we're trying to build this app from scratch. So the tools we'll be using is we'll be using Bootstrap. So we're using Bootstrap, and then we'll be using HTMX. So in case you don't have HTMX, you can go to the official website, and then you can download this HTMX, right? And you also can download Bootstrap to help you with the UI interface. So let's go back again and start building from scratch. So I'll go back here. I have created my virtual environment. See, there's nothing here. These are the previous ones, and I want to go back into a directory called hyper project, and I'll move into hyper because hypertext HTML. Then I will just create one. So in case you don't have Django, since we are in a virtual environment, you can just go and pip install Django, and we are using Django 5, but Django 4 will still work. And we are also going to install GPT for all, right, to help us communicate with our LLM. So we are using Django and then GPT for all. Right. You can also use OpenAI in case you want. Perfect. Now let's create our app. So Django admin start project, and I'm going to call the project hyper project. It's going to create the structure for it. I'll move into hyper project, and then I can see the structure. If I go with tree, you can see you have the hyper project. There is a manage.py, and I'll create my app. So start app, and I'll call it as my hyper app. I prefer to give these names to know the difference between the application. So if I go with tree now, we have our structure. Perfect. So let's open this one with VS Code. But before we open it with VS Code, I'll create a static folder where I'll put my static directory. So inside the static folder, I'll put in my Bootstrap, my HTMX right there. Okay, so that is it. Let's open it with VS Code, and let me stop the old app which is running, this one. And then since you're already here, I'll go back again to the application, and then you can see we have my project. Inside my project, I will import OS, and then I'll go back to the installed apps, and I'm going to add my app there, so which is hyper app. So this hyper app refers to this hyper app here. Perfect. Then since I want to use Bootstrap and stuff, I'll go down to my static directory here. Then I'm going to create some options in which I can add static files, right, so that I'll be able to reference to these static files out of the box. So this is going to be my static. So we have static root, and then we also have static files directory. So these are the two main ones. So inside my static root is going to be the path to my root. So path.join, and I'll pass in my base directory, and then I'll pass in the root directory. And then I'll also go back from here and do the same thing. So this is a directory, so I'll pass in os.path.join, then I'll pass in my base directory, then my static. So this static here refers to this static directory here. Perfect. Then I'll move into this static and I'll put in my bootstrap and the rest. So I'll copy it from the previous application that we're working on, which is here. So this is it. So all of these things there. And I'll go to my hyper app. Inside my app, I have my static, and I'll paste them here, as you can see. Perfect. Then I'll go back to here. So we have it here. So you can see that HTML is there, which is important. And then we also have the rest there. Perfect. So we are done with the settings. Then I'll close the settings. I'll go back to my URLs, and I need to connect my app, this application, to the main app, the main project. So I'll go with path. Then I'm going to specify the route, which in this case is going to be include. I want to include my app to it. So this is going to be my hyper app.urls, and I need to import include. Perfect, right? So since I have these URLs, I have to go back to my hyper app, because that's the name, hyper app.urls. I have to create the URLs here in the same location, right? So it's going to be my urls.py. Then I'll copy this and then close the URLs inside the project and the URLs for the application, which would be this. And inside here, I'll specify the path, and I'll specify the route, views.index. So where is this views.index coming from? It's supposed to come from this views, so I have to import it. So it's going to be from .import views, and then I need to specify the name, which is going to be home, right? But where is this views? It's coming from this views.py, so I have to create it here. So this is going to be def index, and it takes, this is our route, our backend, takes in the request, and then it takes in some context, right? So the context in our case, we have the title, which you can call it as hyper app, and then we're going to return render something. So we are rendering a request, and then it takes in another template. So let's give the template name, so index.html, which we will create, and then the context, right? So let's create this index.html, which is a template. So in the same location as my app, I'll create a directory called templates with S. Then I'll create two files. So the first one is going to be my index.html, right? And then I'll just create my stuff here. So let's go with 5. Going to do the basic ones, then title. So let's save it and see if everything is working. So we have our views, which is pointing to our index.html, which is here. And then we are passing in this context data title to our template. So let's run it and see if everything works. I prefer to run from Commander, so my apologies. Then to run it, I'll just go back to the same location as my manage.py, then Python manage.py run server. If I run it, it's going to tell me that it's listening on this port, which is the same port you can change the port, but I'll go back here and then I'll paste it here. and you can see that we have the hyper app. So this hyper app is coming from our views, right? Hyper app. Perfect. We are done with some of them, but it is for us to add some other features to it. We will add them later, but I would want to add some other features to it to make it better. But let's build the basic application itself, right? And then we will add the bootstrap and then all the other fancy stuff around the app, right? So in my views.py, I want to create a session to add nodes, right? So let's go to add nodes view, then going to pass in my request. And this add nodes view is going to take in some content. So I'll call this nodes content. And then I'll go with, because we are using ATMS, I'll just go with post.get. Then I'll pass in the node content, right? So we will explain this one later. And then we want to save this data somewhere. Right, we want to save this data into a database. So we want to save the data into a database. And Django makes it easy for us to do that by using the model concept. So I'll go back to my models directory here, or not directory, but file. Then I'm going to create my nodes models, right? Nodes model. Then I'm going to inherit from models.model. And then we will create something very basic. So we have the content, which is going to be models.character field. Let's give the max limit or max length of, let's say, 1000, and then blank, so that we can accept blank, and then no true. I can also accept true. You can also make it more strict later. Then I also want to specify a created date, which is going to be models.datetime field. Then auto now add is equal to true, right? So that will have some timestamp to it. So that is something very basic we are building here, right? So we can call it as created at or created date, anyhow you want it to be. So this is going to be our model, and I need to register my model. So I'll just go back here. So from .models, import my nodes model, and then I have to add it to admin.site.register. Then I'll pass in my nodes model. So this allows us to see our models from the admin page. Then once I've added the model, I have to rerun it here because it's going to tell me that there are some migrations to be applied, right? So I'll go back here, save this, and then let's create it. So it's going to be nodes model, which I have to import. So from .models, import my nodes model. You can call it node model, but yeah. Then I need to object.create. You can also use model forms, right, if you want, but yeah, to help you make your work easy. But let's go with the basic. So content is equal to the nodes content. That is, so this is going to save it right in our database, and now we can now return all the nodes in our data. So nodes model dot object.all, and then I want to return some context, and then the content I'll be returning is I want to return the title. So let's go to nodes or hyper app, and then this will be the nodes. Then let's return render. So this will return a particular template, right? So I'll create the template later. So let's go to notes. Inside notes, I want to return some data, right? So I'll call it as the list.html. Then I'll pass in my context. So we have to create this one because we want to send some specific amount of data, not everything. So let's save what we have done. And if I go back, I have to apply the migrations to see the effect. So if I cancel, and I can go back here, and then let's make migrations. So I created a migration file, then migrate. So this migration file contains information about the model that we have created, and now it has migrated. So if I run the app now, the information on the migrations is off, and I can come back. Everything works as expected. We need to create the form as we had here. We need to create a form to receive the data, right? To go to the endpoint that we have created. So I'll go back here, and inside my index, I need to create that particular form. So let's go with div, and then we'll be using Bootstrap. So let's start already. So container, and then we will create another div, which is going to be a class of row, right? Then inside this, I'll create another div, which will be of a class of a column. So we have one column. So this column here will be for the distance, and this is going to be my chat column, right? So this is going to be the chat column. And then, so we can just go with my this is the chat column, right? So we have one column for the data itself and another column for the chat interface itself, right? Perfect. Now let's build a form here. So this will take in a form, and the form will take in an input with the test, and then the name of the test is going to be my content. So this content here is what we are sending here, right? So it's the same thing. So note content, I'll go back here and I'll call it as note content, right? Perfect. And then I can paste in a placeholder. So let's say add notes, and then we can add a button, and then I'll call it as say submit or add notes, something like this, right? So we have our session to add the notes here. Perfect. If I go back and I refresh this, you're going to see that we have one here in which you can add the notes, and then we can also add the chat interface also here. Perfect. So let me close this and close this one, and then we need to have a route for sending information, right? So we need this particular route here, and you also need this list here, right? So inside here, when the person adds the data, we want to show that particular data, right? So we can use a table to show the data. So table header, right, which we're going to be table row and then table data, and the table data will have the notes itself, and then it also have the date it was created and then some actions. So this is going to be the date that it was created, and then some actions, right? Let's say delete actions. So if I save it and I refresh, you're going to see a table. So notes, dates, actions, and then inside this is the first row, right? And this is the head. Then we also need to create one for the body where the data itself is going to be, right? So this is where the data, so here is where our result is going to be placed, right? Okay, so perfect. So I'll go back to my views and I need to work on the route. So I'll go back to the URLs, then I'll just create my first route. So let's call this one notes /add, right? And then I will go with my views dot add notes view. Then the name of the view is is going to be called add notes. Perfect, right? So we need to specify where this note is going to, right? That is it. So I go back to the URL, so everything is working as expected. So we have the notes. Can take off the backslash, and then inside my HTML, the index.html, we need to use, this time we'll be using HTMS, right? Not the normal Django, right? Because we want to do every connection once, right? So how do we do that? So I'll go back again to my index.html, and then I'm going to include the link. So we have link, I think it's link. Yeah, I want to pass in the path to the static file. So static, right? And then I have to pass in the path there. It's supposed to be this, right? So this is going to be the path to inside my static folder. We have static, we have JS, and we have HTML. So I'll just pass in my this is going to be for the cascading CSS, right? Bootstrap, but I need one for the JavaScript, right? So this, I'll just put in my bootstrap here. So I have bootstrap 5, then inside bootstrap I'll pass in my CSS, then inside CSS I have my bootstrap.main.css, which is inside here. I have bootstrap, you have all of these bootstraps there, which is quite a lot. Bootstrap main.css, so that we have the bootstrap here. So if I refresh, so it's given as static I failed to register. So Django is very useful. If I scroll down, it will give us how to do that, right? So if I fail to register it, so I can easily go back to the app here on top, and then I can load the static. I think it's supposed to be, I want to load the static file so that we can be able to use it here. So right, we can use if I save it and I refresh, now we see that it has changed a little, right? So if I go back and I modify this, so we have the row. If I change the button to class btn, say primary, you're going to see that it automatically changes. So bootstrap is working. I can also change this one, so class right, and this is going to be my form control, and you see that it automatically changes, right? Perfect. So the bootstrap is working behind the scene. Now let's add the JavaScript for HTMS. So I'll go back here to body, then I'll pass in my script. Then this script will go with my src for the source. Then I'll do the same thing as I did above. Because you have already loaded static, you go with static, then the path. So it's going to be my js / my htms.main.js. So this htms.main.js is coming from here, which is here, right? So that we can have access to it. And if I refresh, everything works. If I go back and I inspect here, if I check the network tab and I refresh, you can see that HTMS has been loaded, right? So that means that it's working. Now I'll just go back again and let's see how to use HTMS. So we have the endpoint already, we have the index, but we need one more. we need this list, right? So where is this list going to be? So this list is going to be whatever is going to be here, whatever information we're going to be placing here. So by default, we would have done something like this in Django. We would have done for, say, item in whatever data that we are sending in notes, and then we would have done, let's say, item dot content, and then you close it, and 4. So this would have been inside a table row. So we have a T row and TD, and then this will be here. Oh, this will be inside here, right? And then we'll do another one for the date to match up, and another one for the action. So this will be for the created at, and then this will be our buttons. So let's go just btn. So because button, then class btn, so danger, and then this will be our x to delete, right? Where is x? I've forgotten my s. So if I refresh it now, you're not seeing anything because no data has been passed yet. So let's save this one. If I refresh, we don't have anything. So that's going to be our table. So this is going to be what we'll be using for our list, right? So let's go back and then add the ATMS. So the idea behind ATMS is this, so that you get it well. So for ATMS, these are the 3 components of ATMS. It goes with this option here. We first have the trigger, right? What you want to trigger. We have the route or the track. So route or track or the endpoint, we have the trigger, and then we have the target. So these are the most important ones. So the trigger can be key up, key down, load, whatever. The target is going to be another place you're going to put the result that comes from the route, right? So the route, the track, the trigger, and then the target. So this is the most important thing you have to know. So we have to go back to the button here, and then the button is now the trigger, right? So we just go with first the hx.post, and this is going to take the route. So we can just go with this option here, and the route, as we saw earlier on, we are using Ginger, so I'll just pass in my URL, and the name of the route is my add notes. So this add notes route is referring to this add note here, right? This particular route. So this is the post. Then we need a target, right? So it's going to be my HS target. So the target is going to be where we want to put this, right? So this is the target here. So now our target now is here, but I can also add an ID, and I can call the ID as, let's say, notes results. Right, so this notes result is going to be my target. So I'll just pass in my hashtag notes results. Right, perfect. So if I save it, the information that we have here in this form will be sent via post to this endpoint, and the result was going to be returned to wherever this is, right? So which is this particular target. So we can actually cut this entire stuff and then put this inside another file. So I'll create a directory called notes. Inside this directory, I'll put in my list.html. So it's always advisable to always put the minimum information that you want to send in your smaller one so that I can move it around, right? Otherwise it will not look nice. So now it's the notes will be inserted here, and what is being inserted here is whatever coming from here, right? And that is why we have it here. Okay, so let's try it. I'll go back again to my application. Hopefully everything works. This is the old one. Let's go to the new one. Refresh. Everything is working. So let's see if I add something like first notes. If I click on add, you can see that it was sent here, but it's giving us the payload was sent first note, but there is forbidden information here. I don't know whether I can see it. And this is because of the CSRF information. So based on Django, you can just copy this and go back to the index. Then inside the form, you can put it here, right? Because it's a form. So if I run it again, there's no error. So let's add in. So first notes. If I click on add, it went, but now the error is that template does not exist. This template called notelist.html does not exist. So let's check it out. It is called list, so we named it wrong, so you have to change the name to list. And now if I refresh, perfect, see that now it went. So if you check the endpoint, the payload was sent with the CSRF protection token, then the response was sent, and you can see that only this response was sent, right? So this response is the response that we placed here. So most of the time, whatever your target is, you should always make it as concise as possible, so that you don't send the entire page. You are just sending only those information, and that information can be JSON, can be HTML, and this is very useful. So it can make you build very powerful single page app, right? Because you are just putting what you need, only what you need, dynamically. That information was sent. So if I try another one, so let's say it works. If I click on it works, so that information was added, right? It works was added. Perfect. So by default, it's working. Perfect. So let's go back again to here. I want to change this one to X instead of, so that we have the S there. If I refresh, it's gone. Let's try. It is so cool. And then we have it here, right? So the app is working. There's also another stuff you can also do with HTMS, is that you can specify, as I said, there is the route or track, the trigger, and then the target. There are also some other customizations that you can also do, which is like how you want it to be. So the method, so you can, there's also another way you can also do. So this is where we have the swap, which you want to, either you want to swap the data, I don't know what I just say, swap the data in a different way. You want to add it to the end or at the beginning, right? So by default, we can change it here. So let's do it like this. Right, so it's automatically added there. You can also add HS swap, and then here you can have, let's say, before end. So before end is going to, all the swap method can be found here. So I go back to the reference, and then we have all of these routes that I said, or routes or HTTP methods, and there is this swap here, right? So if I go back to swap, we have before begin, before end. By default, it is in HTML, right? But you can change them as you wish. So I can just go with before begin or before end. And now if I go back here and I add another one, so this is the old one. So let's go back to the new. If I add cool so much, if I go with add, so now it has added it to the end. I can also change it from before end to after or before begin. So as you can see, there are some swap methods before begin. So before begin, so it's going to add it before begin, is going to add it before the beginning of it, right? So notice, so let's go just new and look at where it's going to be. So this is another way, right? So there are different ways you can also do that. Okay, so let's keep it as inner HTML or before end. There are lots of things you can do, right? Very cool. Okay, so we are done with it. Now let's add the next route, which is a delete route or the delete endpoint. So delete is going to be def. So delete nodes view. And then we can just pass in the request. And then delete always take a primary key because we want to specify what we want to delete. Don't want to just delete anything. We want to specify what specifically we want to delete from our data, right? That is what we want to do. So how do we do that? How do we add the deletion, right? So I can just go back again to the list that we had, and then we want to add it. So we have it as, one moment. How do you delete? So we first need to fetch the data that we want to delete. So note. So it's going to be my note model.object.get. I'll pass in my ID or PK, which is going to be my PK. And then once we get the data, we want to just delete it. Right. But when we delete, we can redirect it to another location. So you can do a redirection, or you can just get all the data that now we have now. It's another way. .object.all, and then you can return it back. So I'll copy this entire stuff so that we return it back again. So now we have deleted it and we are returning the same thing, right? So if I save it and I go back to my list, which is here, I can now put in my hs delete, and this will take in the route that we had, which is going to be my URL, and this will go with delete nodes, and then it takes in the item.id. So this item.id is coming from here. I'll save it and then I'll go back to my routes. That's what we are passing here. Then go to my URLs and I need to add it there. So I'll copy this one here, and then this is going to be the nodes delete, and then we need to specify the primary key. So I need to go with my backslash, then my primary key, so it's going to be my integer pk, right? And we can just change this one to delete nodes view and then delete nodes. So we have the route now. If I go back to the application, refresh, let's take in custom. If I add it here, we see we have it here. And then in case I want to, let me reduce it, in case I want to delete it, once I click on delete, you can see that it was sent, but it's giving us an error, forbidden. So how do you fix this issue when you are not using a form? So this is not a form, right? And then this is a form, so we can add it here. So how do you fix that issue? So there are several ways you can fix it. So the simplest way for fixing this issue, in case you don't have, you cannot add a form here, you cannot add this one there to here, is to go back to your views file, or not your view, but to your base file or your index.html file, and then you can add here, right? So this particular place can go down and I can add some custom JavaScript there. So script, then this is going to be my document dot body dot add event listener, and this information that I'm adding is coming from ATMS, right? So it's going to be my ATMS config request. So this is going to add to our event. Let's create an arrow function which will take this, so event, and then event dot detail dot header. So for the headers, we are going to be adding the same thing we would have done. So CSRF-Token, and then we will pass in the same thing that we'd have done, which is my CSRF-Token, right? Yeah, and then let's close this. Perfect. So this is it. So we are just adding the same error that we're having, this one here, to the headers, right? So we are adding it in our base.html so that every request that is sent that is not in a form, like all of these things, this is not using a form, it is protected, right? So let's try it again. Let's refresh. Let's say new, add, and if I click on this, now it went, right? So the information was sent. If I go back to the headers, you could see that it is protected. The cookie was added to it, right? As you can see, perfect. And then we got the response back, which is exactly the same thing, right? Which is very cool. But you notice that once we did that, you see that it did not put it in the right place, right? So this is one of the ways, one of the issues you may have when you are trying to work with ATMS. Like sometimes the result is placed in a different place. And why do you think the result is like that? It's working, but it's brought the entire result and then it placed it there somewhere, because by default we have to specify the route or track, the trigger, the target. We forgot the target. That explains why it failed, right? So there's no target. There is a route and a method, but there is no target, right? So the trigger by default is the button, because the button is a trigger. But so I can just go back and then specify the HS target, and this target is going to be my notes, right? Result. So this note result is the same target we had here, notes result, which is the same one that we had here, right? So that's what we are referring to. If I save it now and I go back, I refresh it, let's say simple, add. If I click on simple, see now it's gone because we specified a target. And if I check the information that was sent, it is appended at the right place, right? So this is something you should always remember. So always you have your route or your HTTP method and then your target, right? Very important. And then since it's a button, we also have a trigger already. There is also some other stuff you can also do, which you'll be working on. So we are done with the app. We have a simple one. Now let's move on from here. There's also an option of doing scrolling, right? Infinite scrolling, which you'll learn about later. So let's move on from here and add the other piece of the app for the chat, which is based on our application. We need this side, right? This side for the API. So I'll go back again to my views.py file. Then now let's call it as LLM, right? So we call it as LLM view. So this is going to be communicating with my GP request. and then we need to build this, right? So let's go to pass. So how do we do that? So I'll go back again to my index.html file, and then we have our first session, which is here. I'll close this one together with, and this is going to be our chat column. So I want to add a table, so let's use a card rather. So I'll go back to the Bootstrap docs. Let's go to cards, where it's cards, KDA cards, where it's cards. Okay, so this is the card, but we want a card with a footer, right? So something like this is okay. We have a header and a footer, so I'll just copy this to use it for our work. I'll go back here and I'll paste it here. So if I save it and I refresh our application, we have one here and one here, right? Perfect. So I'll modify this because we don't want the text to be center, and then we want to call this one as, let's say, chat, right? So if I save it, we have the chat here, perfect. And then we don't need all of this. All of this, we will take it out, the body. This is where the text is going to be. And then here, we will put our form, right? So let's put in our input tag. And then let's give the name. So the name is going to be my, let's say, search temp query, or can call it search term, and then we can just give it a class of btn, but form control. If I save it, I come back here and I refresh, we have here, so that I can actually ask in something. Let's pass in a placeholder. So ask a question. I save it and I refresh. We have ask a question. We need a button, right? So we can also add a button to it, but let's not add a button yet, or we can just add a button, and the button is going to be send. Then we can just go with my type of the button is submit, right? So btn, so class btn primary. So if I refresh it, we have it here, right? Perfect. We can also make it beautiful, but let's keep it like that. And then how do we do a reset button? So I can just copy this one and add reset. So to reset it, just go with reset. And then we can just call this one as X, right? To delete it. If I go back and I refresh, let's make this one danger. If I refresh this danger now, so if I type in something, hello, it's supposed to reset this form. So it's reset class btn. Yeah. So let's refresh. So it's not working, but we refresh it. Don't worry. Yeah. So that is a reset button, and then we can now move on from here and send this information via this search term to here. So how do we do that? So we will just go back again and do the same thing we did. So it's going to be request. I'll call that my search query, which is going to be my request dot post dot get. Then I want to get the search query. So this is a dictionary, this post is a dictionary, and then this search query refers to here, this particular search, the one is attached to the name. That's what you're sending. Perfect. That is for the LLM stuff, right? Very simple. Then once we are here, what we need to do is that I can also repeat this. So I'll copy this one here. For now, let's send the same thing. We will add some features to it later. Perfect. You do the processing here. So we do the processing here, but here we want to change this one. We want to send a specific amount of data. Always send what you want to send. So I would want to add an alert for it, right? So let's pick this alert, which is a simple one. So simple light alert, and that is what you're going to be sending. So I'll create another partial, another very minimum HTML inside the notes, and let's call it as results.html, right? Then I'll just paste in here. So if the result is sent, we want to send only the results, right? But I want to pass this search query so that you can see that it was sent. So I'll pass it here. And now let's try it. So I'll go back again to the application, which is here. As you can see, if I click on this, I want to send the information here, right? But I need to specify the route because we already have the route here. So I'll copy this and then specify the route inside the URLs. So this is going to be my notes, and I'll call it as, you can just give it any name, right? So let's call it as ask, right? And this, we'll call it as my ask LLM as LLM view, right? And then I'll just give it a name as LLM, right? So this is the ask view. Then I have to go back to my index file here, and then we need to specify what we need, right? So what we need is, we need an HTMX method, and then the track or the trace, which is going to be my endpoint. So the endpoint is URL, and then this is as LLM, right? Which is the name that we placed here. So as LLM, that is it, right? And then the next we need is, we need a target. So where is the target going to be? So we want to put the target up inside the body, right? So this is where the target is going to be. So we have the class body, yeah, but I can put the target here. So how do I do that? I can just put in a p tag, then I'll just put in my ID, and let's call it as my results and then we call this one as hashtag results. Perfect. So this results, whatever is being sent here, will be placed here, right? That is our target. And we also need to specify a trigger, right? So this is an input field, so we need a trigger, and a trigger can be a key app. Like if a person click on key app, we just have it, and then we can also specify not just key app, but we can also specify that, okay, don't just do a key app, but we want you to also check if there are some changes then before you do, right? Because if you're just doing key app, any single character will work. So if I save it here and I refresh, and if I go back to the inspect, let's go to the network tab. If I type in hello, you see that it's sending, it has been sent, right? And you got the result back, right? So the app is working, so it works. So that you see how many it is sending. Every key was being sent, right? And this is okay, but it can flood your application so that you have a lot of links. You see that all of this were sent just for it, right? So in order not to flood your backend with a lot of requests, you can specify some parameters for the key app, right? So in other words, you can say, okay, if I type in some keys, I want you to check if there are some changes, right? If something changed, and then I want you to delay it, right? So delay it for, let's say, 500 milliseconds, right? So what is doing that, if there's a key app and if it change, delay it and then send the entire stuff. So now if I go back and I refresh, if I type in hello, so now it took some time and now the hello has been sent as our payload and we have gotten our stuff, right? Not hello, but hell. So now this is changed. So this is better, right? So that doesn't throttle it. And this is very, very cool. This is very nice from HTMS, right? So even without sending this, without clicking on the send button, once I type something, this works. It will automatically send it, which is very useful without clicking on this. But we can add it to, you can add this same trigger effect, the same thing to the button also. So which is this button. Right, and then it works. So this is now a button. So for the button, I can just leave it without a, because it's a button, I don't need a trigger because the button itself is a trigger. But you can also add triggers to the button if you want. So if I go back and I refresh, I go with hello. So it's sent already because it's key up. If I click on send, that is also sent again, right? And the result was none. So why is it none? So if I try again, new, send, it's none. So you have to also work on the, for the button, we have to specify the swap. So let's add it as it is swap. And then I can put it as before end. So let's try it again. So send, it's still failing. So you could see that there, let's try it again. Hello world. It was sent, but if I click on this, no information was sent. That's why it's returning none, right? Because no information was sent to this post. So there is also another feature for this, in which if you are using a button like this, you can also add the ID of what to include, right? So I think it is called include, and then you specify. So I can also pass in an ID here. So let's say ID to send, right? And then I can just go back to my hashtag to send. So this is going to include whatever is, because it's not a form. If it is a form, then it will work, but this is not a form. So since this is not a form, I can just specify that, okay, include the content of this ID, of this, whatever is here when I click on this button, because it's not a form. So if I refresh, I go with hello, this is going with key up, but if I click on the send now, so now it's working, right? And you can see that it's appending to the end. It's appending to the end of it, right? So this is very useful in case you are building a chat app. So hello, hi, it works. And if I click on this, it also works, because now we are using the HS include to tell that, okay, when I click on this button, this is not a form. This entire stuff is not a form. If it's a form, you don't need this most of the time, because once you click on the button, everything within the form is sent when you click on the button. But since this is not a form, we are including which ID, which particular inputs or element within the session that we want to send when we click on the button, right? Very cool. So in case I have a form, if this was a form, then I would have done it this way. I would have, let's copy this, and then since it's a form, I don't need this. So this, this one will be off. and then this ID will also be off because it's not a form. And now if I refresh it and I type in hello, right, if I click on send, it said it's sent because it's not a form. And you could see that if I check the headers, we have the CSRF added, although we have not added it. And the reason the CSRF has been added is because we have included this one here, right? So every request is being protected, right? So that is the very basic overview. So ATM is very nice, it's very cool, very powerful. So just with this little code, we have just a post target trigger. We are able to send stuff when we click on something, or we can also use this option here, right? And then remember that there's also the HS include. Okay, so how do we add the LLM to it? So we want to add the LLM to application. So I'll save this one here, go back here, and then we will import GPT for all. So from GPT for all, import my GPT for all. Then I want to specify my model path. So the model path where my models are, and then I also want to specify the model name where my model name is. So to get the models, you can just go back to GPT for all, which is from Nomic here, and I want the actual website. You can pick any of these models, or you can use OpenAI. So the model I'm picking, there's Mistra, there's Orca. Orca is 2B. I want the Orca Mini. So there is Orca Mini, which is not that big, right? Because for something small, we don't need something very big. And this is the model we are using. And this model, I have all my models inside my documents. I have my LLM hub, and this is the model we are using, right? So I'll just copy this link, go back to my application, and that is going to be the path. So this is the path. I can make it as R, and then // because this is Windows. That's why I'm doing this. And then the name of the model, which was this Orca model. So I'll copy this entire stuff and I'll paste it here, right? Perfect. And then let's go back here, and then we need to work on it. So I'll call that my response. It's going to be my GPT for all. I'll pass in my model name, and then the model path to my model path, right? And then I can now pass this. So let's call this as my, you can give it any name, because if you go back to how it is done, if I go back to here, GPT for all, go to Python, there is official Python bindings. It shows you how to use it, which is very simple. So install it, and then you just go with model.generate. So that's what we're trying to use. I'll go back again, and I'll call this my model, and this will be my response. So let's go to response. So this, and I'll pass in the search query here, and I want the tokens to be 200, the maximum, because if I go back with this, you can see that we have the prompt string, maximum token temperature, top K values, top probability, and the rest. But we just need these ones, and then the result, we want to pass the result here. So result, right? So yeah, we can call it as response rather. Yeah, let's call it response. So response, and then inside my result file, I will now take off this. So this is going to be the query that was sent from the user. and then we need one for the AI. So this is left, and then this will be for the response. So this is what the person sent, and this is what the AI sent. So let's make it with a different color. So we have primary. So primary, or let's make it, yeah, this is light, and then the one that you type, we'll call it as primary, so that there's a difference. So let's go back again to our wonderful app we have built, refresh it. Then if I type something like, you say, and this is very important that you have to check it out. So what is Python? And now it has been sent. The payload was sent. We are waiting for the response, and as you can see behind the scene, it is communicating with the LLM, and then after some time the response is going to come, right? Sometimes I wonder how platforms will see that the response came, which is quite huge, right? So Python blah 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 blah, right? You can also add if I type what is Mistral, yeah, what is Mistral? Let's see. So it was sent. What is Mistral A? Mistral is a it's very fast, right? So this is very cool, and this, as you can see, the previous one is gone, so you can ensure that inside your index here before, and you add it to it, right? Because with this you can add this swap to here, so that it adds this to the end, so it doesn't delete it in case you use it that way. And the other thing I was going to talk about is you can make this scrollable, right? If I go back here, it's going to return the result after some time, but we want to make it scrollable. In other words, like I want to be able to scroll it. For example, like I want to be able to have an option in which I can how do I say it, right? So it's gone, but I want to have an option in which I can scroll overflow, right? So yeah, and that's how they call it. I think it's called overflow, and the simplest way is just to go with, one moment, inside the body I can go with overflow auto, right? So we have this format here. So what is the difference between Orca and then Llama? So now the information was sent. What's the difference between Orca and Llama? What's the difference between Orca and Llama? So the information was sent, and then we want to be able to have an option in which we can scroll up and down, right? So that is how to build a very simple app using Python, Django, HTMX, and then LLM, right? So you have built a very simple application using HTMX, which had this simple workflow. We have an input session, we pass in some tests, it uses HTMX to send a test to the LLM, the result is returned back to the user, and the same thing for the API, right? And then we have seen the concept of the route or the HTTP method, the trigger, the target, and then swap. And there are, of course, there are a lot of things you can do with HTMX. There are so many things. So thank you for watching this tutorial. In case you have any question or contribution, you can put inside the comment section below. And see you another time. Stay blessed. Bye. So maybe another time we try and add some more nice features to it. See you. Stay blessed.